Welcome to From Stuck to Scaled, Growth Strategies for Small and Mid-Sized Businesses, your guide to navigating growth, transformation, and success in today's ever-changing business landscape. Each week, we'll dive into proven strategies, real-world case studies, and actionable insights designed to help small and mid-sized business owners scale smart, lead stronger, and grow faster. Let's get you unstuck and on the path to sustainable, scalable success. Now your host, Julio Gonzalez.
And we are back with another episode of From Stuck to Scaled. I am your host, Julio Gonzalez, and today we're diving deep into the essential elements of effective leadership for small to mid-sized business owners. As businesses grow, so do the complexities of leading mixed tenure teams and fostering a thriving organizational culture. In this episode, we'll explore how leaders can navigate growth challenges while prioritizing people development, even amid the pressures of day-to-day operation. We'll discuss the crucial balance between cultivating a psychologically safe environment and harnessing the power of emerging technologies, including AI. Join us as we uncover practical insights and strategies to enhance your leadership effectiveness and ensure your team's success. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Kevin Jordan. Kevin is an International Coach Federation certified career and leadership coach with over 2,000 hours of coaching experience under his belt. He specializes in guiding small to mid-sized business leaders through transitions and growth, ensuring they reach peak performance and develop high-functioning teams. With a rich background in people-centered leadership and strategic advising, Kevin focuses on melding professional growth with personal values, helping clients navigate the complexities of leadership in an ever-evolving business landscape. Kevin's expertise extends to fostering a sustainable organizational culture, developing communication and collaboration skills, and optimizing team dynamics. He's dedicated to being a strategic partner in his clients' journeys, illuminating their paths towards success and fulfillment. Join us as we dive into the unique challenges and opportunities that small business leaders face today, and glean invaluable insights from Kevin's wealth of knowledge and experience. And let's welcome Kevin to the show. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Julio. Good to be here. Appreciate you having me. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you so much. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your business.
Yeah, so my name is Kevin Jordan, and I am an executive leadership and career coach. I think for today's purposes, we're mostly going to focus on the leadership development side of for small and mid-sized businesses. So I help people mostly one-on-one navigate in terms of being more effective leaders in their careers. That could be increasing their collaboration and communication abilities, increasing their strategic thinking and their influencing. How are they thinking about developing their teams and themselves as they grow their teams and their businesses? So I really work with people in all those dimensions. Like I said, it's in a mostly one-on-one, but sometimes I'll do work, especially with some small businesses, I'll do work in small groups with people because that's actually a little bit more economical for people to do things. Sometimes I'll actually work with a small business or a mid-sized business team of leaders. So it really depends on what the need is from the client on the client side, where they want to go and how I can best support them going forward. And that usually is in the form of coaching, but that can also take the form of trainings. It can also take the form of facilitating meetings. It can also be a little less coaching and more mentoring, so a little bit more advice oriented. So it's really, my whole practice is very bespoke to whatever the specific client needs. And when I get in there, there's no playbook that I'm going to hand them and say, you must do it this way. We're going to figure out where they need the most help and how I can tailor my practice and the resources that I bring to bear to support them.
So we're early in 2026. So for the last quarter, I was originally going to say, the beginning of this year, but it's a little early. So for the last quarter, what are some of the types of leadership issues that you're seeing come up in your customers that they're needing help with?
Yeah, so there's a few that kind of come off the top of my head here. One is continuing to navigate their businesses and growth with what I would call mixed tenure teams. So these could be folks that are newer to the organization, coupled with folks that have been around a while. Could span generations. Right now we have about 5 generations in the workforce. So how do you integrate the different sets of skills, different sets of opportunities? Different groups bring different things to that perspective. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And there's a lot of intentional coordination and integration that has to happen to make those teams come together. Kind of concurrent with that is developing your people while you're developing your business. So sometimes leaders or business owners want to kind of figure out how to do these things separately. And my advice is actually you do them together. So how do you craft opportunities, assignments, things in the business where the business moves forward, but also the people's development moves forward as well. Culture is a big thing in any business size, but especially in small and mid-sized businesses. People are very sensitive to how their leaders and bosses react, the tone they set, the tenor they set. And so making sure that as a leader of your business, you are creating that space that you really want people to be at. What is the employee experience you want? What is, we use the term, the psychological safety of the organization? Can people speak up? Can they make mistakes? Is it a learning environment? Et cetera. I'd be remiss, though I'm not an expert here, to not mention kind of the human tech integration. So where are things going with AI? Every business is quite different right now in terms of where they're at, where they're going to be. Some head that I'm working with, some are kind of going all in, others are kind of wait and see. Some folks are in the middle, sort of like the Goldilocks approach. And so I think being curious about tools like AI, seeing where there might be opportunity, making sure that you're actually, what problems are you really solving for with any technology before you jump in? You know, what is your current state? What is your desired future state, et cetera? And then, you know, I think with a lot of leaders, and I'm not a big fan of sort of formal goals or resolutions at the beginning of the year, but for a lot of folks, what they're thinking about too is, well, how did I show up in 2025 as a business leader? How do I need to show up differently in 2026 for myself, for my team, for my customers? And where are my gaps in that space? What am I doing well? What could I do better? Let me pause there and see if that generates any questions for you.
Oh, a ton of questions. You know, one of the things that I've seen in my customer base and prospects throughout 2025 was a lot of uncertainty around tariffs and interest rates. How are you seeing that evolve now that interest rates have dropped at least a bit? You know, because I'm seeing things kind of stabilizing a little bit. There's a little bit more movement in the mergers and acquisition space. Are you seeing that reflect in your customer base?
Yeah, I mean, last year I would use the word uncertainty was kind of like the sort of a default term for many people, and a little bit of paralysis in some areas too. And I think this year I wouldn't say that the uncertainty has gone away, but people are finding ways to live with that a little bit more.
Right.
So, you know, I saw, you know, for instance, in my work, longer sales cycles, closure cycles last year. They're still not as short as I would like them, but they're shortening up. I'm seeing people, it reminds me of the first few months after COVID when kind of everybody sort of froze for a second, especially on the people development side, and then said, well, wait a minute, this isn't going away anytime soon. We still got to keep figuring out how to do stuff. And so I think it took a lot of cycles and churn in 2025. So coming into 2026, I'm cautiously optimistic. I've been very fortunate. The people that I work with have either continued to renew, and or folks like you have been generous with referrals for net new folks. But yeah, I think they're going to continue. There's going to be continued uncertainty, whether it's in the economic space, socio-political, other things going on that people are going to have to navigate. And from a development point of view, it's really an opportunity because this is like probably more change than we've ever dealt with at any one time, you know. And so from a leadership perspective, there are many examples we can use to help our people navigate through these things that are actually concrete and applicable to the everyday business. So it kind of takes the abstract down into the concrete.
And I love that you touched on, I think you said 5 generations currently in the workforce and culture. One of the first podcasts, I think it was third episode, was with a Gen Z Alpha, whatever the most current ones are, talking about some of the challenges of being in a multi-generational workforce. You know, so how do you help your customers, you know, tackle the different work styles, the different learning styles? Talk to our listeners a little bit about that.
Very carefully. So it's, I actually start with back to the culture piece. What is the culture you have now? What is the desired culture that you want? What are the people that you have now that fit into that? And where do you need them to go? And so I try to stay very much away from sort of the, you know, let's generalize across all the generations, because I don't think that's particularly helpful. We need to understand who the people you have in each organization, how are they showing up, what skills do they have? I mean, oftentimes we've turned this into a competition, and I'm like, why don't we turn it into a compliment? Like, whereas Julio does this well, Kevin does this well, they both need to work together. How can they teach each other? There's a lot in both in the literature, but also just in practical application of peer-to-peer mentoring. We're just helping people come together in different ways. So finding those opportunities, I try to help people facilitate those within the organization because I can't be around all the time for everything. But I mean, it really comes down to what does that leader in that organization want in terms of their people? Where do they want them to be? And what is the tone that they're setting? Because it's, if you have someone who's open, who's driving change, who's trying to bring the groups together, those boundaries can get broken down much more simply. If you have people who are very siloed, either by function, by age, or demographics, it becomes much harder in pursuit of just running a more effective business.
Yes.
And so I think this kind of comes back to the point I made earlier, not separating business development from people development. It's always trying to keep them integrated in ways that propels the business forward, and the people too, because the people are likely the ones who are driving the business forward or not in some cases. And then if it's not working, really, what is it about that? Rather than just saying, well, it's Z's and boomers and they just are jerks to each other. Like, that's not super helpful, right? It's like, well, what is it about that these two groups, are they not being seen and heard? Are they not getting what they need? Can they not find a common ground? I mean, in many things, this is just one example. If you can find 5% to agree on, start there. Just start there. You don't have to solve it all at one time. And I think we have this, as humans, this propensity to want to just, well, if I can't do it all at once, I'm not going to do it at all.
Right.
And this is relationships. This is people. This takes time. And, Stephen Covey talked about the speed of trust. People need to see your behavior aligned to your words to be able to trust you, much like, when we do in Provise, there's no like, trust, refer.
That's right.
I mean, so a lot of time, I've been talking to clients about this recently. People get this intellectually and they want to get there super fast. And I'm like, well, you can only get there as fast as the people you're moving along with you, because some of them are just going to be on a longer journey. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen, and it did come up in that episode, is the fact that Gen Zers are in fact hungry for that involvement from the boomers. We think that the boomers don't want to talk to Gen Z and vice versa, but there's a desire there. There's a hunger for that communication, for that conversation. And I think to your point, helping break down those barriers and encouraging that conversation is very beneficial to all parties because they do learn differently. So it's not just, throw a piece of whatever, material out there. It's how do you adjust that for each to make sure that the learning takes place.
Yeah. And you're saying something really important. And this is the hard part wrapped in cultures. What is the employee experience you want to have at a macro level, but what is also the employee experiences you want to have at a micro level? Now, can you tailor one for each person? Probably not that specifically, but how do you start to approximate, hey, we know people like Kevin and Julio, they like to do things like this. As their boss, can I help them get reasonably closer to that? Whether that's a specific assignment, a way to learn, a way to interact with people. So the literature talks about job and career crafting. That's really what that is what are people's values, likes, dislikes, skills, etc. And how can you help them? And they help themselves. They have agency too here. Help themselves to get approximately closer to those things. We're never going to be able to, you and I work for ourselves. There's stuff we don't like to do.
Sure.
And that's just part of the deal, right? So we're never going to get probably zero in terms of things we don't want to do. But if you can reduce that number down to a space, your opportunity to increase engagement, increase retention, increase discretionary effort and motivation go up exponentially. And the data is pretty clear about this. And so it's easy for me to say it and hard to do in practice because we're all kind of navigating these different things. And then, of course, you get into the whole thing is, are you navigating an in-person culture versus a hybrid culture versus fully remote? I don't really have an opinion. I think you have to pick the one that works best for your business and your people. I don't think there's a right or wrong. But that is a whole nother thing that's to be taken into the mix as well, And so it's a lot. And that's while you're trying to do whatever your job is, So I have a lot of empathy for people, both the people, owners and leaders, but also the staff and the employees too, because they're all navigating this together. And I think they sometimes forget they're all on the same journey, just in different paths and in different ways.
And kind of bringing this generational aspect to kind of a conclusion here. We've entered what's been termed the silver tsunami. So every single day, 25,000 individuals are turning 65. And that's going to be the case for the next several years. So we're going to have that many more, seniors still in the workplace. A lot of these are business owners. And one of the things that I talk to my customers about is, what are you going to do with your business when you retire?
Yeah.
And I get a lot of, I'm going to leave it to my kids. Well, do your kids want it?
Do they know?
Do they know? Exactly. Do you run into a lot of that? And how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, so I handle succession, just for your audience, because I work with clients of all stripes. Succession is always a topic. I think in the small business world, small to mid-sized business, it's actually where you started right there. I mean, if we come back to like, okay, you want to do succession, we'll call it capital S, formal succession. You want to start planning. Great. Is it someone in the family, a child or a relative? Do they know? Do they want it? And what are you doing right now to help them prepare for it? If it's not a family member or a child or anything like that, then do you have people in your organization who have expressed interest that you would potentially sell it to, transfer to, whatever the mechanism is? And are you developing them? I think the development pieces are very similar. I think being clear about who your target audience is. I think people make assumptions that sometimes don't bear out. And so if you know who your target audiences is, and you know kind of your horizon around how long you as the leader or the owner wants to be in the business to whatever degree, you can start to work backwards from, okay, well, I'm going to bring Kevin along here, or I'm going to bring Julio along, and they do this really well, but if they're going to really run this thing, they need more experience with the financials or more experience in sales, if they're more of an ops person, so it's really looking at the totality and recognizing, there's a lot of humility here if we talk about kind of leadership attributes as the owner, that these are many people's babies. They've cultivated them, and it's going to be hard to let go even on a good day. Totally get that. And recognizing that people, even your children or your family members, won't do it the same way you did it, but doesn't mean it can't get to the very similar outcomes or even better outcomes or different outcomes, right? And so kind of helping those folks, what does the let go look like while cultivating? Because one of the things I see is people, I want to do succession. They get really excited, but they don't really give enough stuff away during the transition for the other person to feel like, well, am I the person? And I don't feel like I'm getting the reps. If we take a gym analogy, the reps to kind of do this. So then we have to kind of talk about, hey, how can you, owner or leader, throttle back a little bit more so a guy like Julio can keep pushing ahead? Because now you're sending mixed messages. You're saying you want them to do it, but you're not really giving them the opportunity. And then the timeline sometimes gets longer or murkier, So I think it's really about having those honest day conversations with people. That's part of my job. It's like, okay, let's talk about this. Maybe the owner's plans have changed. Maybe you want to work a little bit longer, or you need to work a little bit longer. Okay. Or you just having trouble letting, whatever the series of things are, it comes down a lot of times to communication and being crisp and articulate with where you're at and where you want to go. And the same for the people who are on the receiving end. They may have put their hands up, but they get down the road like, I don't think this is for me, or I don't think I'm your guy or gal anymore. Like, okay, let's talk about that, right? But I think the biggest danger is assumptions on both sides, and then things, we humans, we spin out from there. So, so we just try to be really clear and explicit, and not assume because we did a plan in February 3rd of 2026 that 6 months from now that's still the same plan. We have quarterly check-ins on things and how are we doing and where are things going and what's changed and what hasn't, because that can also be a source. Well, we talked about this 2 years ago. Well, have you talked about it since?
Yeah, planning is not a one-time event. It is absolutely ongoing, and too many businesses. Too many businesses do that. Plan 5 years ago, and they think, no, that doesn't work.
Right.
You are listening to From Stuck to Scaled, and we're talking leadership with Kevin Jordan. So if you haven't been listening, you got to rewind and catch up. So Kevin, talk to us a little bit about some of the leadership mistakes that you see when businesses are scaling, right? So now, we've hit a threshold of growth. So we need to adjust the business What are some of those things that you see that get in the way? Great intentions, I'm going to hire 5 people, 10 people, and all of a sudden things start breaking. So what do you see? How do you address those issues?
Yeah. Well, one thing is recognizing that you need to hire 5 or 10 people. So as things scale, if you've been sort of the firefighter or the hero of your own business for a long time or the one person show, just giving up control, so great that you've identified a need to hire. How well, we'll talk about what are the skills, attributes, knowledge you need, and then how are you going to let go once those people come on board, right? So there's that piece. There's also the piece of recognizing what got you there as a leader may not get you into the future. And so what are your current state of your leadership attributes? Where's the current state of the business? Where does the business need you most right now? Many times business owners, especially if they start it from themselves, they kind of Jack and Jill of all trades. So we start to figure out what are only things you can do in this role, given that you're hiring or have hired other people. You know how to do these other things, but that's actually their job now. So getting really clear, well, I, Julio, can really only do these 3 to 5 things in the business. So I need to put my time and energy there. And I need to prioritize those 3 to 5 things too, because Kevin, Susie, Bobby can do these things over here. So it becomes this kind of transfer of skills and knowledge and accountability. Well, the owner's still accountable for everything, but responsibilities from a day-to-day perspective. I think also focusing on, what is your ongoing development plan for yourself as a leader? And once you've hired these people, like, hey, just because you hired them doesn't mean their growth has stopped. It's like, it's just starting, and we talked about succession. This is where, as you're scaling, people should always be thinking about succession, even at a little s level, even if they're not going to leave anytime soon. Like, what if you just want to go on vacation for a couple of weeks? What if there's a medical emergency? How are you cross-training other people within the firm, not just about you, so they can do those things? I mean, it's a mark of poor leadership from my point of view if you can't go and unplug for a week or two and the place, you're worried about the place falling apart. Please go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, a lot of business owners don't understand that when they go to sell, if you are the business, there's no selling.
Right.
So you need to become, the operator and not the business.
Right.
So that's a conversation that I have often with business owners, especially those that are experts in their specific areas. And that goes back to, hiring staff and nurturing those and, transferring responsibilities. So that's a big one that a lot of folks don't understand. I'm gonna sell my business. I'm gonna get rid of this. I'm gonna go retire in Tahiti, and you get an offer that then gets halved because there's too much risk because you're the one, or it simply just doesn't work because you are the business, not much of anything else. It's not your product. You are the product.
That's a really important point. I mean, with founders or business owners, there's oftentimes we hit a point where we have to ask the question: are you actually the best person to be doing this anymore? Period. Especially if you love to be more entrepreneurial. And there's a big, I see, more on the startup side. Some people will get to maybe a certain employee headcount, maybe a certain ARR, and they're like, I'm out because my passion is really to build things from scratch. So back to that operator piece. You also, when we talked about scaling as well, many times processes, procedures have been in someone's head. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, we kind of need to write those down somewhere, or we actually need to formalize them, or both, and train people on them. And so it feels like going backwards or going slow, but in reality, it's the maturation of the process of the business. And I'm not a process guy. I mean, I think they need to be.
That's mine.
Yeah, I think they need to be right sized for every single business.
Yep.
But this, but people just like, well, we'll just do it this way. Like, well, your team doesn't know what this way is, right? And so there's people sometimes will ask me, regardless of if it's small business or large business, well, Kevin, doesn't it just take more time to coach people? And I said, empirically, yes, you will always win that argument, but that's not actually the right question. The question is, if you're not taking the time now, what's it going to take you down the road? And if you invest in these people and then they leave, what you're not creating that experience for them, right? And so, I think that getting the scaling of the business and bringing those kind of what people consider more mundane things along, but they're vital for just the back office operations of things, is so key. And I think it gets short shrift, which you probably can speak to even more than I can. So,
yeah, one of the I had a conversation very recently with my friend Paul, who might be listening, and one of the things we got into is breaking out of that expert role, and we got into this whole back and forth on creating, those process documents, and I kept telling him, have the person that's supposed to be doing the job create the process. No, but the way that I do it, have the person that's going to be doing the work create the we went back and forth like 5 minutes on this, and it's like, you need to set the expectation. What you care about is the end result,
That's
not
right.
the process.
That's right.
And all of a sudden it was like, you could see the little light bulb turn on, and it's like, and he told me, he's like, my father had, who was an entrepreneur, told me this over and over again, focus on the outcomes. And too many business owners want it done their way.
That's right.
And that goes back to, the 5 generations and how everybody does their work. And, there's so much into that, but as a leader, we need to be, expecting an outcome, not a process.
Yeah.
And too many get stuck in, I want it done this way.
Right. And then they become micromanagers and everybody gets annoyed, and I think that my sense is with some of the younger folks I've worked with, there's just much less tolerance for micromanagement and hovering. It's
Absolutely.
like, look, you told me I'm a smart person. I believe I'm a smart person. I've got these skills. You told me you need me to do this in the interview process. And now I get here and it feels like a bait and switch. Like, I don't want to be an order taker. I want to be a strategic partner to you, even if that's a more junior person. Like, they want to have opportunities to grow. I get it. I mean, I did too when I was coming up. You don't want to just be told what to do, most people. And so how do you unleash that power while still being comfortable? And I think this gets back to, what is the leader's definition of accountability in the organization? You've seen this, I'm sure, a lot. People do not prioritize well, or if at all. So if everything's a priority 1, as I tell some of my clients, that means nothing is prioritized.
Right.
Or if everything's a fire drill, that's not a systemic way to operate. So the concept of systems thinking, introducing system thinking to leaders and to teams, and like how, it's the old thing, you drop the pebble here, what's the ripple effect across? What are the unintended consequences of this, And so, or the intended ones, depending on what you're doing. So, people don't want to take that time always. It's not that they're incapable. It just, that's more effort. Well, hey, Kevin, that sounds like a lot of work. Well, yeah, it kind of is. But what's the downstream effect if you don't do these things? And especially if you're not happy with what you have right now.
So how do you help your customers identify those future key leaders? Because they've hired a bunch of folks. They've had folks working for them for some period of time. And now we're talking about maybe, elevating themselves or even stepping out. So how do you help them find those key individuals?
Yeah, so partly what we do, many folks I work with, they have 1 or 2 people either in mind, or they're already actively cultivating some people. So we'll start with, okay, well, why did you choose this person? What makes you think they're succession ready? Have you had a conversation with them about that? What are they doing right now to help you? And then we start to look at really so let's say it's in a larger organization, it's a vice president or executive person. And there's someone on the cusp of that level. So, well, what are the things that your boss needs you to do differently going forward, so you can take more off of their plate, and what things could you delegate? So we start to look at the job that person that they're succeeding them wants. What are they doing now in that role, and where are the gaps? And maybe, and I say gaps not with any kind of pejorative intent, just they haven't had a chance, they did, whatever it might be. And we start to try to fill those gaps as best we can, so the leader can keep doing what they need to do or move on to the next thing. It becomes a lot simpler when the leader, we came back to the things like, what's only the 5 things Julio can do? When the leader figures out or knows where their core time needs to be spent, the distillation of things that falls out starts to become pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, okay, well, we don't want to have stuff flow downhill, right? Because then we kind of bury people. So how do we strategically help them maybe take a few things on? And we, kind of like, it's almost like habit laddering. So how do you kind of help people be successful without crushing them at the same time?
Right.
Because sometimes people get a little too excited to delegate, and it goes whoosh. And it's like, whoa, like, this is more than I asked for. And so I'm looking at, what are the key attributes of the culture at large, that leadership attributes that are rewarded? What are the attributes within this particular organization or this smaller mid-sized company? What does the leader feel like he or she needs to pass on and needs to kind of keep going with their people? So as they bring people up, what's important from a values perspective, from a development perspective. So it's very situation specific. It's very contextualized to the business, to the leadership. And it forces the leader to really take a step back and say, well, how did I kind of mark my path forward? What was important to me and my folks who brought me along?
Mm-hmm.
Are those things still important?
Right.
To some degree, they still are. But many times the things that got people there will not get them forward. What's changed? And what do I need from this person? It gets a little bit trickier when there's someone putting their hand up for succession that isn't ready. And It doesn't mean we ignore that conversation, but it becomes a different kind of conversation. We've been mostly focusing on people who are ready or who are about ready to get into the role. Those are fun from my point of view because everybody's sort of aligned. It's not like can they do it? It's like to what degree and by when, and how do we set those folks up for success so they're pushed. They're out there a little bit, but they're not out there without a safety net because that's nobody. I mean, I don't know any leader that I work that wants their people to intentionally fail. That's not super helpful, but they also don't want to be like, you can't be too conservative either with it. So it's way more art than science,
Absolutely.
So,
a definition that I was given of culture is how we make decisions, which I think is a partial definition or one component. How do you define culture?
I like Seth Godin's definition, famous marketing guy. He says how we do things here, so he keeps it very broad on purpose because then things flow out from that. And much like one of your points would be right there. Yep. And it really, if I had to put it, explain it to a child, it's like how we do things around here, And so it's because it allows for the whole conversation to unfold. But when you say things, what do you mean? Well, this is how we process these things. So it is the norms, the behaviors, the habits, the values, the rituals, that all encompass an organization. And you're finding out what's really most important to them. Why is it important to them? Why do they talk about their mission and purpose in this way and their vision for their organization in this way? Usually there's a founder's story, especially in a small to mid-sized company. There's something that's motivated them personally and or professionally to start this business. A lot of people want to be of service. They want to help people. So understanding what drives the leaders, what drives the owners, why did they do this? How does it flow down? What do they want their employees to resonate with and to live out? And sometimes it gets hard, not intellectually, but if you've lived this your whole life and you have new people coming on board, it's not always the most interesting thing to keep talking about it over and over again. And so I remind my folks hey, if you have new people, they haven't heard this before. They don't know what's important to you. I'll never forget when I used to work for many years at Kaiser Permanente here in Northern California. One of our executive vice presidents held a quarterly town hall. And every quarterly town hall, there were the same 6 slides. You could take it to the bank. Mission, vision, values, purpose, and I kid you not, every year on the People Pulse survey, a chunk of people said, I don't know what the organization stands for. I'm like, I don't know how this is possible. It's so it was so important to him. And I always took that away. It was so important to him that he was going to make sure that at least 4 times a year in very public settings, and he did it way more than that, he was going to let people know why these were important and it should be important to us too. Now, as leaders, back to it, people can make it their own. Do they have to talk about it in the exact same way we do? No. They need to find their own talk track, but they need to have a talk track that resonates with the overall messaging of what that organization is trying to impart on its employees. So people who are newer or don't know or both, oh, this is why Julio keeps talking to me about this. This is that important. And hopefully that's being sussed out in the interview process.
Sure, absolutely. You would hope.
Yes. That's why I said hope. Exactly.
So, Kevin, I'd be remiss if we didn't touch a little bit more on AI because, as we touched on a little bit earlier, AI is everywhere. I've been at a couple of conferences and it's just AI. A lot of it is, just pure marketing, but there is a lot of AI out there.
Yep.
And a lot of confusion. So how are you helping your business owners tackle AI in the workplace?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm encouraging owners to just be curious about AI, either in their personal use and or professional use. And I'm really agnostic as to which AI you use. I personally kind of like Claude. I play around with Claude a bit. That doesn't matter to me as much. I mean, what AI fundamentally is changing how work gets done now and will get done into the future. And people are experimenting with it at work, whether you want them to or not. I mean, I'm seeing right now with organizations where there's a lot of great individual learning, but the organization hasn't quite got their handle on what do we want to do with this collectively. And it's forcing some very interesting conversations, because part of what's happening is people just want to graft tools on. And I'm sort of saying, well, wait a minute. What is the nature of your business? Where are you at right now? What is your desired future state? And how does any tool, AI included, help you get there or not help you get there? I mean, I can see some businesses where this may not be a huge thing for them.
Right.
And not because they're ignoring it. They've done some analysis. I think many people right now, you talk about the marketing, are caught up in the hype and the hullabaloo of it all. Like, well, if I don't do something, I must be behind. I'm like, well, says who? Yes, a lot of people are saying that, but when you look at your business, is this actually going to help you? Is it going to facilitate things? Is it going to make things potentially worse or more confusing? So there has to be some thoughtful analysis and some grounding in where are we at now and where do we want to go, and how do these tools help us get there? And how do we then think about changing the workflows? We talked about processes and other things. What workflows would benefit from this? How are we going to invest in our people? I mean, I've seen a lot of, unfortunately, people are just sort of like kind of left to their own devices with training and knowledge. And look, I'm a big self-starter kind of guy. That's great. But at a certain point, if you're making this a business imperative, like what is the concurrent source set of resources for people to plug into? And what don't you want them to do with the tool? What do you want them? I mean, there's a whole bunch of privacy and security implications. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of proprietary information implications. I think it can all be worked out, but it takes time and a thoughtful approach and in some degree of an intentionality to doing it. And, this is colliding with the hyperdrive of we should just go, 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 go. And I'm like, well, yes, and, you have to slow long enough to sort of figure these out, or you're going to get kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? And frustrated employees. And this doesn't even take into account more on the culture side. How are you talking to people about AI relative to their jobs? People are worried about losing their jobs. They're worried about their careers being materially affected. We have a daughter about ready to come out of college, not really certain like what that world's going to look like for her, And so people have concerns, and they want to know that where the organization is going with these things. Why are they going in that way? What is it? I mean, the fundamental question that's being thought about, even if it's not being articulated, is what does this mean to me? And do you support me, and how will you support me? And so I think this puts a lot of pressure on the owners of organizations, but also on their leaders around them. Like, how are the leaders talking about it so they can talk to their teams about it? And how, coming back to the organization of attributes of psychological safety and open communication, how can people also bubble this up from the ground up to just sort of say, Julio, I'm really kind of tense about this. Can we talk about what this might mean for my work? Or you're definitely implementing a bunch of AI in my space. Should I be polishing up my resume? Or is there an opportunity for me to do higher order tasks because the tech can kind of take these off my plate? Without having those kinds of explicit conversations, we as humans kind of tend to make things up, and it's usually not in our favor. So, we kind of get into the dark space pretty quickly. And that's a bigger lift to pull employees out of that, right? Especially if it's not true yet or going to be at all. And so I'm really encouraging leaders to be very transparent with their intention, be very transparent what support looks like, be transparent with what you know and what you don't know. If you don't know, just say it. We haven't figured that out yet. Great question. People want
I tell my customers that they need to approach it from two perspectives. On one side, your employees are using AI to do their jobs. Mm-hmm. So what are they asking ChatGPT, on behalf of your organization? Are they uploading files? Then that gets to the whole privacy. So you need to be cognizant of that. But then on the other side, what problem are you trying to fix? Right. Don't implement an AI solution just for the sake of implementing an AI solution because somebody said I needed one. What are you trying to fix?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there has to be a problem, right?
Right.
And if there's no problem, then, maybe you kick the can down the road, but at least have the conversation with your employees about what they should or shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And if you don't know what they should or shouldn't be doing, call in an expert.
That's right.
Have a conversation and do some exploration. It's an area that everyone needs to at least have some awareness on. And there's a lot of great individuals out there, a lot of great companies out there that can help you, with an AI strategy or at least even an AI conversation. Have that exploration. Everyone is needing it. Business owners need it from a strategic perspective, and the employees need it from an uncertainty perspective.
Yeah. And I've been, in the spirit of kind of self-study, this may help your audience. I've really been enjoying the work of Ethan Mollick, who's a professor at Wharton at Penn. He wrote a book in 2024 called Co-Intelligence, but really talking about how humans and AI kind of can come together. And what I like about him is he's a very curious, investigatory kind of guy, but he's not a tech guy. He's a business professor. And so you can follow him on LinkedIn and other places, in Substack, and he kind of puts it in plain English, and what he's seen and how he's actually teaching his business school courses with it and other things. So you start to get some ideas around kind of like, this could be helpful here, or maybe not, as the case may be, So it's just an interesting resource that folks may find helpful.
Kevin, as you know, no one leaves the show without providing some actionable tips that our listeners can implement today to positively impact their business. So what can you share with us?
Well, as we're still at the early days of 2026, I think one of the key things is understanding where you as a business wants to go by the end of it. What will success look like at the end of this year? Telling your team what success will look like, and how do you help them with their own professional development in that success? Concurrent with that is, what does your development as a leader need to be as part of that success? And being very explicit about that. Things like promotion opportunities can come about. Things like succession opportunities can come from there. So I think having ongoing open communication, open dialogue, being transparent about the state of the business, but also the state of people's development and your own development are super helpful. I think also, coming back to the AI piece, acknowledging this uncertainty, not just with AI, but just in the general world, and that we're people who are craving that in your workforce, you may not be able to give it to them. And so being in terms of transparent about what are we, quote, certain about, and where do we still have questions? And letting that dialogue continue to flow, because I think that kind of keeps the temperature down in the room. So those would be two kind of big things in the communication and development space. I think from, as people are thinking about, we talked about the silver tsunami. If you're thinking about kind of getting closer, well, what are your plans? Are you crisp with your plans? Are you getting experts to help you with your plans? Are you talking about your plans? Are you going to leave the business in the way that you really want it to be? And that'll be different for different people. And how are you going about doing that? So you're not stuck, or you're not rushed, or whatever might happen. So a few things for people to kind of think about going forward.
And Kevin, where can our listeners find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at my website at, let me double check, kevinjordan.coach. And you can always reach out to me on email at kevin@kevinjordan.coach. Those are the primary ways you can get a hold of me.
All right. And that is our show for today. I hope you found our discussion with Kevin enlightening and actionable. Remember, effective leadership is about nurturing your people while navigating growth, fostering a culture of psychological safety, and embracing the changes that AI brings to the workforce. As you step into your day, reflect on how you can apply these insights to your own leadership journey, whether by prioritizing development with your team, fostering open dialogues, or defining your personal North Star. Join us next time for more conversations that will help you transform your business and achieve your goals. Until then, keep moving forward, stay curious, and remember, your leadership journey is as much about your people as it is about the results. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
See you all next time.
You've been listening to From Stuck to Scaled, Growth Strategies for Small and Mid-Sized Businesses, produced by Optocution LLC. For more information, tools, and resources, check out our website www.redefinepossible.co/podcast.